Dan Happel was able to come to visit with him. I met him at the state GOP convention in June, where he presented the Agenda 21 and asked him if he could come to Missoula, and he said yes, and we figured out a date that worked for him. So let's give Dan Happel a big Five Valleys welcome. There's a speaker up there.
Okay. Well, I thank you folks for
Did you turn it on? I didn't turn it on. You have to lift it out.
Why do you use yours, Susan?
Yeah, that works.
That works.
Yep. Thank you all for asking me to be here. I appreciate this. I tell people this is a passion in my life right now, is to try to inform people of some of the things that are going on in our nation. We are at a stage, a point in our history that if we don't turn things around very quickly, we are at a point of no return. And so with that in mind, I'm going to try to get through this program as quickly as I can. It's a lengthy program, but please bear with me. It's a good program. I think you'll get a lot out of it. I use this first four frames just to tell people that this is what I want to do when I retire. I want to teach a two-semester course on progressive socialism in the United States. Because that's exactly what we're experiencing right now, and our universities will not tell us that that's what's being taught in our schools. This is a big footprint conference that I attended with a number of folks from all over the world. It was called Big Footprint because it was at UCLA at the faculty center there. This was 2 summers ago, and I had the great fortune to be there with some of the most brilliant minds in the world. The reason that I was asked to be there is because I'm one of 2 county commissioners in the United States that are recognized as being actively involved against Agenda 21. This gentleman right here, Richard Rothschild, is the first county commission in the United States to throw ICLEI out of their county, Carroll County, Maryland, which is just outside of Baltimore. This gentleman here is Lord Christopher Monckton. He's a House of Lords. He was also Maggie Thatcher's Minister for the Environment. And then, of course, there were people all through this list. But this gentleman right here, Michael Kaufman, is today, I joined him on Voices Montana shortly, and he is over in Billings, and he's going to be doing a program over in Billings today and tomorrow. So if you know anyone in Billings, you might let them know that he's going to be over there. This is a philosophy of rights, which is the difference between our U.S. Declaration of Independence and the UN Declaration of Human Rights, and it's pretty clear that there's quite a difference between our philosophies. Our purpose of government is to protect the natural or unalienable, and that is a proper pronunciation, not unalienable, unalienable rights of each individual. Under the UN, it's control the individual for the greater good of a global community. The purpose is that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and under the UN, the rights and freedoms may in no way be exercised contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations. Wow. In short, in our Declaration of Independence, you're born with rights, government exists to protect those rights, and you and the product of your labor belong to you. Under the UN, government grants, restricts, or withdraws those rights according to its needs, and you and the product of your labor belong to the community. This is communism. We can call it whatever we want, but it's communism. These are several quotes by very famous men that we're familiar with. George Washington, government is not reason, it's not eloquent, it is force. And like fire, it's a dangerous service and a fearful master. And Daniel Webster also, a quotation, good intentions will always be pleaded for every assumption of power. It is hardly too strong to say that the Constitution was made to guard the people against the dangers of good intentions. There are men in all ages who mean to govern well, but they do mean to govern. They promise to be good masters, but they do mean to be your masters. And I don't know if too many people are aware of this, but are you aware that U.S. and European bankers were the primary source of funds for the Bolshevik Revolution and made it possible for Lenin and Trotsky to overthrow Tsar Nicholas? And most people don't even realize there was a reform government after the Tsar that was only in power for about 6 months. And that government was very similar to ours. But it was overthrown for the Bolsheviks. And it's no accident that that happened. And this gentleman here is George Perkins in J.P. Morgan Banks, Andrew Carnegie, Ryan, and this is J.D. Rockefeller, and incidentally, this gentleman right here, who most people will probably recognize in cartoon version, is Teddy Roosevelt. And this is Karl Marx. Most people don't realize Teddy Roosevelt was our first progressive socialist president. He formed the Bull Moose Party and ran against Taft, his former vice president, because he was not happy with how far Taft had gone back to the Republican Party. This is the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. You'll recognize many of these. Abolition of private property and land, heavy progressive graduated income tax, abolition of rights of inheritance, confiscation of property of all immigrants and rebels, centralization of credit in the hands of the state, the central bank, which we have too. Centralization of the means of communication and transportation in the hands of the state. We're rapidly evolving into that. Extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state. We see that with all the takeovers of private industry by government, such as the GM bailouts and so forth. Equal liability of all to labor. We haven't quite gotten there. We've got the exact opposite right now, but I'm sure that that'll come soon. And then combination of agriculture with industrial manufacturing. That is really what big agribusiness is all about, and the elimination of small farms. Free education for all children in government schools. We're seeing that. And this is a famous window that's at the Fabian Society in London. And it was commissioned by George Bernard Shaw and Sidney Webb. And this shows Sidney Webb here on the left and George Bernard Shaw on the right. And they're remolding the world to meet their image of it. This is the famous shield of the Fabian Society. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing. And then down below you'll see these folks are worshiping this stack of books on socialism. It's interesting, but John Maynard Keynes, who we're very familiar with in economics, he's literally what our entire financial system is pinned on today. He was a Fabian socialist, and his economic models and theories are being taught in all of our university systems. This is a copy of Stalin's 1936 Communist International Official Program Declaration. This world dictatorship can be established only when the victory of socialism has been achieved in certain countries or groups of countries. That's the United States, basically. When these newly established proletarian republics enter into a federative union with the already existing proletarian republics, and when these federations of republics have finally grown into a world union of Soviet socialist republics, uniting the whole of mankind under the hegemony of the international proletariat organized as a state. Does this sound like the UN? It does to me.
Yeah.
And this is the Constitution of the USSR, and that Constitution has a Declaration of Human Rights which is virtually identical to the UN Charter. This gentleman is Alger Hiss. He was the lead author and the executive secretary of the Dumbarton Oaks Conference that drafted the framework for the United Nations. Hiss was accused and later convicted of perjury for his part in Soviet espionage. And that was while he was serving with the State Department. He actually was elected as the first Secretary General of the UN, but he was forced to resign when all these allegations came up. And this is a quote from several folks that we may be not familiar with, but James Paul Warburg was one of the authors of the Federal Reserve Act. And his quote in 1950 at the U.S. Senate, "We shall have world government whether or not we like it. The only question is whether world government will be achieved by conquest or consent." And the other one down below that, "We operate here under directives that emanate from the White House. The substance of the directives under which we operate is that we shall use our grant-making power to alter life in the United States so that we can comfortably be merged with the Soviet Union." That was Rowan Gaither, president of the Ford Foundation in 1954. Well, welcome to the New World Order. This is the book that was generated, Limits of Growth, came out of the Club of Rome. This was published in 1972. This is a book that talks about Agenda 21, the model paper, the white paper that was produced after the summit in 1992 at Rio de Janeiro. Agenda 21 is the name of the UN published white paper produced at that Earth Summit. It outlines a socialist plan for a sustainable world in the 21st century. This book right here, the full version of it is about 800 pages and 40 chapters, and it is very concise in describing what has to happen for a sustainable world. This is a blueprint for the 21st century, and that it was organized and chaired by UN Undersecretary Maurice Strong. He was the Secretary General of UNCED. Mr. Strong is a Canadian billionaire and acknowledged Marxist, and he's now living in communist China and acting as an advisor to the Chinese government on economic policy and international trade agreements. This is a quotation at the Earth Summit in '92. "It is clear that current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving high meat intake, consumption of large amounts of frozen and convenience food, use of fossil fuels, ownership of motor vehicles and small electrical appliances, home and workplace air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable." This is Mr. Strong here. And this is his very good friend, Mikhail Gorbachev, at the Rio +5 conference in 1997. And I don't know if people know really what happened with Mikhail Gorbachev, but after he was deposed as premier of the Soviet Union, he was moved to the Presidio by George Herbert Walker Bush. He was given millions of dollars by the Ford and Rockefeller Foundations to fund the Gorbachev Foundation, which is the parent of Green Cross. Green Cross is the most respected environmental organization in the world. And incidentally, Mr. Gorbachev has never renounced his ties to international communism. This is a quote by Mr. Gorbachev just before the so-called fall of the Soviet Union. "In October 1917, we parted with the old world, rejected it once and for all. We're moving to a new world, the world of communism. We shall never turn off that road. Comrades, do not be concerned about all you hear about glasnost and perestroika and democracy in the coming years. These are primarily for outward consumption. There will be no significant internal change within the Soviet Union other than for cosmetic purposes. Our purpose is to disarm the Americans and let them fall asleep."
And we did so.
The Rio Summit was billed as a world conference on the catastrophic global environmental issues facing mankind and a blueprint for a sustainable 21st century. In reality, the Rio Summit was a blueprint for the future of mankind, where our Constitution, our national sovereignty, and unalienable rights are eliminated and replaced by a world government controlled by a powerful cartel of international financial elites under a system of socialism. And this is a quote from David Rockefeller's memoirs, 2002. Some even believe we're part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty and I am proud of it. This is Mr. Castro at the Earth Summit, and he was met with universal cheers in total contrast to our representatives who were greeted with boos. And incidentally, this gentleman right here is Prince Philip. That's Queen Elizabeth's husband. And he's famous for his statements that if he could die and come back to Earth as anything, he would like to come back as a plague that wiped out the human race. This is George Soros over here, and this is a gentleman we're pretty familiar with too. The main obstacle to a stable and just world order is the United States. That's a statement by him. This is the global neighborhood. This is a book called Our Global Neighborhood. And that book was written and at least edited by Nelson Mandela. This is Mr. Mandela here, standing next to his good friend who is the Communist Party president of the ANC. This is Joe Slovo. And you may not recognize him, but Mr. Mandela, I'm sure you remember his wife, Winnie Mandela. I thought it died on me.
Let's see if we can.
Yeah.
I turned it off.
Yeah, this one is.
There
we go.
There you go.
Okay. You're familiar with Winnie Mandela, who was famous for her necklacings when Nelson was just coming to power. Necklacings are taking a tire, tying people's hands behind their back, putting a tire around their neck, filling it full of gasoline, and lighting them on fire. This is, and yet in today's world, Mr. Mandela is considered a great savior, and he is one of the most highly regarded men in the United Nations. And incidentally, in our country, they did a survey of the most famous and the most respected men in the world, and Mikhail Gorbachev and Nelson Mandela were in the top 5. That's what we've been teaching our kids. That's the stuff that's been coming out of our press. This is a family of Boers, family of Dutch farmers in South Africa, and this is happening all the time now, literally every week. These families are being killed and their properties going to the state and being distributed to the ANC members. This is Occupy Wall Street. You'll see this clenched fist, and I'm going to go back. I'm sorry, I should have done this. Mr. Mandela, you'll see that this clenched fist is the sign of the Communist Party worldwide. And you will see that same clenched fist at the Occupy Wall Street rallies all over when they were going on all over the United States. Occupy Wall Street was treated by the mainstream press as a populist, inclusive, pro-American demonstration representative of the majority of Americans, the famous 99%, and giving very favorable reviews, while the Tea Party's been labeled by most of the mainstream press as radical and representative of racism and right-wing extremism. Well, I have a lot of friends who are Tea Partiers, and they are the exact opposite of that. This is one of the people that you'll see at all these Occupy Wall Street rallies. This is an organization called Unanimous. And this group is an international anarchy organization. This is the kind of signs. This is a demonstration, and I think these are probably college kids. This is Columbus, Ohio, and this is the sign that you see in a lot of these rallies. This kind of signage is what they're all about. The whole system has got to go. Capitalism is organized crime. This is another Occupy Wall Street. And this is another one, and you'll see the background here is the Solidarity of the International Communist Banner. And this is Arab Spring. Just a picture, a random picture of that. May 1st. This was, of course, May Day is the communist holiday, but that's also Occupy Wall Street and SEIU. And I don't know where this came from, but it's fairly appropriate, I think. May Day, it's not just for communists anymore. We see Mr. Gore up there. This is a quote by David Rockefeller, a report from the China Traveler, and this was in August of 1973, just within about a month and a half before Nixon normalized relations with the Chinese. And this is a quote by Mr. Rockefeller. One is immediately impressed by the sense of national harmony. Whatever the price of the Chinese Revolution, it has obviously succeeded in fostering high morale and community purpose. General social and economic progress is no less impressive. The enormous social advances of China have benefited greatly from the singleness of ideology and purpose, communism. The social experiment in China under Chairman Mao's leadership is one of the most important and successful in history. Now, this was right after the Great Leap Forward in the Communist Revolution in China that took out about 60 million Chinese. President George Herbert Walker Bush signed the Rio Accords at the 92 Summit on behalf of the United States. I don't know why. Within months, cabinet-level agencies and UN-sponsored non-governmental organizations started embedding policies of sustainable development into bureaucratic regulation and lobbying efforts all over the country. And then shortly after his inauguration in '93, President Bill Clinton created the President's Council on Sustainable Development by Executive Order. By making sustainable development a permanent feature of all federal policy within the administrative branch, he effectively bypassed Congress and threw Agenda 21 implementation processes into high gear, forever changing the mission of agencies from, and this is important, we used to think of federal agencies as serving the people, now they serve the environment. The Sustainability Treaty failed passage in the U.S. Senate in 1994 as required under our Constitution by a vote of 98-2 because of the last-minute heroics on the Senate floor by Dr. Michael Kaufman and Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison. And this is what they presented to the U.S. Senate. This is a simulated corridor and reserve system to protect biodiversity. And this is a map that was generated that shows the various areas. All the red areas are core reserves and corridors with little to no human use at all. And the buffer zones are very highly regulated use. And really the only normal use in here is this green. And you'll see that a little bit of that sprinkled around the Midwest. This is what they want to do to our country. And then, closer to home, this shows what they want to do to Montana. And this shows all these various corridors and wilderness areas that we keep hearing about. Sustainability of the environment and creating a more equitable world are buzzwords for destruction of the middle class through income redistribution, applying impossibly restrictive regulations that destroy property rights and the deliberate deindustrialization of America and Western Europe through international trade organizations such as NAFTA, GATT, the WTO. We're finally starting to hear more about the North American Union and, of course, the European Union. Under Agenda 21, many of man's activities are listed as unsustainable and targeted for elimination by the year 2030. All private property ownership and rights, targeted for elimination. All forms of crop irrigation, pesticides, commercial fertilizers, except when approved for big agribusiness, which will be taking over agriculture in our country. Livestock production, most meat consumption will be a thing of the past. We'll be living in a vegetarian world.
Can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
How could anybody possibly want to wipe out crop irrigation?
Don't ask me, but they're doing it, and we're seeing the regulations every day. I'm seeing it, and we've got in our own legislature right now all kinds of water bills that are starting to restrict the amount of irrigation water that's available to farmers and ranchers. I mean, it's happening as we go through our daily lives. We're seeing it, and it's incrementalism. It's not one big thing that shuts everything down. It's just continually eating away. It's like Dr. Kaufman said this morning on the Voices of Montana. It's death by 1,000 cuts, and that's really what we've got.
And they're trying to limit livestock production?
Absolutely, they want to get rid of our domestic livestock industry, and we see it all the time.
Why does anybody want to limit the amount of meat we eat?
That's because of this group. And let me get through my program, and then I'll be happy to answer all this stuff at the end. Thank you. Privately owned vehicles and personal travel will be eliminated by 2030. Burning of fossil fuels for energy production or personal vehicular travel will be eliminated. Single-family homes and suburban communities will be eliminated. Most forms of mineral extraction and timber harvesting are targeted for elimination. Dams, golf courses, ski lodges, and vacation resorts will be eliminated. And we're seeing they're tearing out dams by the dozens every single month. So, and yes, ma'am.
Just real quickly, where is the data that you're reading? Where is that coming from?
Agenda 21.
It's coming right out of their own manuals, out of their own publications.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And this is a very important one right down here. The sustainable human population under Agenda 21 needs to be reduced to under or around 1 billion people.
Whoa.
Now, I want them to be the first to volunteer, the people who are coming up with this stuff. But now they've come out and they said, well, that can be adjusted slightly. It could be as high as 2.5 billion people if we're willing to do everything exactly as they say.
Who is they?
Who is they?
Yes.
The folks at the UN that are pushing this program, Agenda 21. Okay, this is a quote, and this is from the United Nations Conference on Human Settlements, Habitat 1 in Vancouver in 1976. This is a while ago. Land cannot be treated as an ordinary asset controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Private land ownership is also a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth, and therefore contributes to social injustice. Now you hear that term used a lot anymore. If unchecked, it may become a major obstacle in the planning and the implementation of development schemes. It's their development schemes. And this is a quote by Richard Gardner. He wrote this article in Foreign Affairs in '74. I'm using these older articles, but because I want you to see how far back this goes. And Richard Gardner was the head of the Council on Foreign Relations, and he's also been involved with a lot of the UN programs. The hope for the foreseeable future lies not in building up a few ambitious central institutions of universal membership and general jurisdiction as was envisioned at the end of the last war, but rather in the much more decentralized, disorderly, and pragmatic process of inventing or adapting institutions of limited jurisdiction and selected membership to deal with specific problems in a case-by-case basis. We're talking NGOs. This is exactly what they're saying. Non-governmental organizations. In short, the house of world order will have to be built from the bottom up rather than the top down. It will, like a great booming, buzzing confusion, to use William James' famous description of reality, but an end run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece, will accomplish much more than the old-fashioned frontal assault. Now, this is the president of the Council on Foreign Relations. To implement the ideas of sustainable development and overlapping of three primary objectives must occur. We'll refer to them as the 3 E's of equity, economy, and the environment. You'll see this in their own publications. They're putting it out a lot anymore. This is it right here, and this is a sweet spot, it right here, and this is kind of lesser, but also kind of a sweet spot. Let's see what these terms really mean under the framework of Agenda 21. Equity, it means using the law and government to restructure and modify human nature. It allows special interests to use the police powers of the state to force compliance with laws that are antithetical to constitutional law. It allows educators and social engineers to stifle individualism, personal responsibility, and self-reliance, and promotes a complete shift in attitudes through public education and social justice indoctrination to a more just and equitable world. We hear that all the time. Where communalism, that's the new term for communism, is good and self-interest in capitalism is defined as greed. We hear that too. This mindset substitutes social justice redistribution policies for equal justice, which was equal rights under the Constitution, and destroys the concept of unalienable rights under the law. The youth will be taught that they're global citizens rather than Americans, and educators will be unwittingly teaching the views and dictates of socialist global planners through programs like Goals 2000, No Child Left Behind, and Common Core, programs modeled from UNESCO's global program, Education for All. The term equitable is used to describe the transfer of wealth from developed nations to underdeveloped nations by moving manufacturing and infrastructure to third world countries through a carbon credit system. We're hearing that's coming up. It was just talked about today in the news. Under the ban of cleaning up the environment. This is a chemical factory in China. If we were really cleaning up the environment and not transferring our wealth to communist third world countries, why in the world would we let this happen? Why wouldn't we have our chemical industries back where in the United States where they belong? The second E is economy. And the economy is the transfer of wealth from developed countries to underdeveloped or developing countries. The authors of Agenda 21, using a Marxist socialist worldview, assume that life is a zero-sum game where the creation of wealth can only come at the expense of others less fortunate, living in third world or what they call exploited countries. The monetary systems of sovereign nations must be collapsed, reorganized, and merged into a world financial system controlled by a cartel of international banking elites and their cadre of central bank planners. Under a one world financial system, all activity can be closely monitored and tightly controlled. Now think about this. I'm going to read through this. Digital financial transactions will rapidly evolve into a cashless society where an electronic device implanted in a card or under your skin can be scanned and electronically entered into a database that will record all transactions, all your transactions. Anyone that fails to comply with regulations or exhibits an attitude of resistance may have their transactions denied and will either comply or they'll starve. This is how you control people. This is a statement by David Rockefeller in '91 at the Bilderberger Conference. We're grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and the other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promise of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during those years. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march toward a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national auto-determination practiced in past centuries. This was 1991, just before the summit at Rio. The third E is the environment, and the environment will be used as a tool to promote political ideas and agendas that would otherwise be so wildly unpopular that they would have no choice, no chance of being implemented. Through various smart growth zoning regulations, wilderness bills, wildlands, and endangered species initiatives, private property can become increasingly controlled and eventually eliminated. Unelected stakeholder councils are organized to give local governments a consensus or a vision statement for their communities. These groups, in effect, are transferring individual property rights to a collective system where all property is tightly controlled by a central planning authority. A regional, national, or internationally sanctioned tax-exempt non-governmental organization is usually behind these efforts and acts as a facilitator to steer the stakeholders to a predetermined conclusion. I don't know if you're familiar, you should look up Delphi technique. That really describes that process. Land use laws become progressively more restrictive, expensive to implement, and difficult to litigate until property owners eventually give up or sell off their property rights. We eventually just become kind of renters or sharecroppers on our own land that we've paid for. This is a quote by IPCC lead author Otmar Edenhofer. We distribute de facto the world's wealth by climate policy. One has to free oneself from the illusion that international climate policy is environmental policy. It has almost nothing to do with the environmental policy anymore. That's by the lead author of the IPCC. In reality, the environment's merely being used as a tool to transfer wealth from rich to poor countries who are 10 to 20 times, not 10 to 20%, 10 to 20 times more likely to pollute the environment because of their lax laws. This is Beijing in 2008, just before the Olympics. This is why they had to virtually shut down the city for a month so that they could hold the Olympics. If it was about the environment, we wouldn't do this. Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, warm and fuzzy expressions. These are words and things that 30 years ago, 25 years ago, you might have heard these words, but they weren't used in our common vernacular. Today, we hear them every day, many times a day. Things like collaboratives and best management practices and outcome-based education, invasive species, all these things that are on this list, we now hear as part of our common vernacular. You might recognize some of the programs that are associated with or tied to Agenda 21 policies. And these are some of them here. The Wildlands Project, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, numerous wilderness bills being passed through, Antiquities, National Monuments Act, National Grasslands Act, Endangered Species Act, Large Predator Reintroductions, Interconnecting Wildlife Corridors, the Yucatan to Yukon Initiative, and everybody's heard of the Yellowstone to Yukon. It started out as a Yucatan to Yukon, but they quit calling it that because of public outcry. North American Biodiversity Treaty, conservation easements nationwide, and this is a killer here, the Law of the Sea Treaty, which will in effect transfer every drop of water to the domain of the UN. This is the Wildlands Project, and I have these maps here. You're welcome to look at them. And incidentally, this is the part of this National Grasslands area right here, which is the eastern, at least half of Montana, and the area of the Bakken. And the group that is the one that's putting that whole program together is right here, and they're located in Bozeman, Montana. This is the Wildlands Conservation Planning and Y-to-Y, and these are very, you can get these maps anywhere on the internet. They're part of Wildlands and other organizations, and they're quite proud of this. And people say, well, this is just crazy. Y-to-Y and all this crazy conspiracy stuff, that'll never affect us here in rural Montana. This was a gentleman, Dr. Harvey Locke, that did a program this spring at Montana State University. And his bio here talks about how he's basically involved internationally in putting together planning efforts to create more wilderness, and he calls it a shared vision for the 21st century. This is Wilderness Conservation Forest Priorities. I happen to be a member of the Forestry Stewardship Foundation. I'm actually on the board. And this is a map that came out of DNRC. This is several years old, so they've updated it some. But it shows the priority areas for forest legacy projects. And I've worked on several of those projects, and I'll show you. And this is the Montana Competitive Grant. Again, this is a couple of years old, but it shows how all the money is being concentrated in these areas. Now, if you think about it, go back and look at what that map that Dr. Kaufman presented at the UN, and how similar these areas are compared to that map. This is another map of a proposed new wilderness. Carolyn Mahoney from Manhattan Island in New York. And this is a program that she tried to get through 3 years ago, but it's back up, and they're pushing on it in a hard way. And Montana would have 8.25 million acres of this, and Idaho almost 10, and Wyoming 3.25. All told, this comes up to a 23 million acre wilderness area that they want to increase. Not what we have, but increase. This is currently listed as a priority area of concern by the Department of the Interior. And guess what? Does this look like what I just showed you that group out of Bozeman is promoting? National Grasslands Initiative. It's free roaming bison and the end of much productive agriculture and resource development. This is the Bakken here. There might be a little reason that our governor, our past governor, was so resistant to developing oil. And the new spotted owl is a greater sage grouse, and Will, you're kind of involved in that too. This is they're trying to create this entire area. If it comes under the Endangered Species Act, it'll literally shut down western cattle grazing on all public lands. And you know, this gentleman, you're talking about beef production. How could they do that? This is how they're doing it. They shut down grazing on public lands, and all of a sudden you're going to start reducing your herd, because you can't graze that many cattle on your own land. And they say that man is the #1 cause, and habitat loss is the #1 cause of sage grouse loss. Well, the predators that are identified as the culprits that are wiping out sage grouse population, ravens are #1. They're nest robbers. They steal the eggs and they eat it. All these small predators down here are in that list. Man comes in at number 14 in scientific and camera studies. Our highest sage grouse populations were in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, when we had sheep and cattle all over the country. And we had a lot of small farms and very few of these big mega farms.
So this is what was meant by large predator reintroduction?
Well, large predator are wolves and grizzly bears and some of the other things that we're starting to deal with. And we deal with them every day in Madison County. I mean, we have a real problem there. And I wished I had time to give you all the information background on it, but it's incredible what we're going through. And incidentally, I'm the chairman of the Mako Large Predator Working Group. So I do know the statistics and I know what it means. These are land swaps, and this was the Rob Ledford. I use this down in our area because that is in our area, and it's where they're taking federal and state lands and they're consolidating the ownerships on them. And that way it's easier for them to be able to trade out different public lands and turn them into wilderness areas. This is the Blackfoot Challenge. This is like the poster child of all the wonderful things that creating legacy properties and conservation easements and wilderness is all about. This is up around the Avon area, and this is a big area, but look what it really is. That little spot right there is what that Blackfoot Challenge is. This is the crown of the continent. This is what Bacchus is promoting and pushing. And if you look at the ownerships on this, the white lands are the private ownerships, and they're trying to target them for elimination. Most of these programs involve restrictions on use of private property near public lands and the gradual implementation of absolute government control of property remaining in private hands. Every time these initiatives are expanded, the property base shrinks as a result of private land being taken off tax rolls. And as a consequence, cost and restrictions to the remaining property owners go up, and the productive use of their land goes down. This is a little favorite. How to boil a frog, do it slowly. Gradualism. You turn it up a degree at a time. That's what we're seeing in this country. We're living through gradualism. This is a report that went directly to the president. This was produced by his security group. And I can't say that it's one president or the other. This one went to Obama, but these same ones have been going out for decades. They're promoted by the UN, by the International Monetary Fund, and it talks about global governance 2025 at a critical juncture, and it says, boy, we got to get on the stick. I'm paraphrasing. Better get on the stick, because if we don't get going, we're not going to get our global government. This is J. Gary Lawrence. He's the chief planner for the city of Seattle. He's the one that was credited with the term smart growth. And he has got some of the most restrictive zoning laws in the country in Seattle. This is a paper that he wrote for the UK, for United Nations for the UK. The future of local Agenda 21 in the new millennium. What he was referring to is ICLEI. This is the future envisioned for average Americans under Agenda 21. Private property, motor vehicles, personal travel, and freedom of choice will be eliminated to save Mother Earth. We've got this new Gaia mentality. God is no longer part of our culture. Now it's Mother Nature. And this is out of some of my trade magazines. I'm a commercial building contractor and architect, and this is out of Design Build magazine. This is shows rail traffic, rail systems right next to major residential developments that are high-rise buildings. And incidentally, in New York City, they're working on trying to create high-rise buildings that limit square footage to around 400 square feet per occupant. This is a new city, and this is being designed by a Chicago architectural firm for the Communist Chinese government. Their editorial said it would support 80,000 Chinese with no automobiles allowed. I think that probably should have been 800,000 or 8 million by the size of this thing, but I wanted to quote it faithfully. And that was in the same magazine, Design Build magazine. And this is that architectural firm. Can you imagine these guys planning a model city, or better yet, a model society? A group of architects in one city planning for 800 or 80,000 or 8 million people, how they're going to live? Forget it. That's a vision that's envisioned under the New World Order. This is ICLEI. This is the International Council of Local Environmental Initiatives. It's become the major driving force for smart growth policies throughout the United States. ICLEI programs have been implemented in 550 American cities, including Bozeman, Helena, and your town here in Missoula. ICLEI uses the slogan Global to Local Action Plans and incorporates highly collectivist central planning concepts that were developed in the Soviet Union during the 1950s and 60s. Stack and pack housing projects, increasing density. They're located next to major transportation hubs that eliminate the use of private transportation. In essence, the cities become islands of intense human activity in a sea of pristine natural wilderness areas. This is what they envision for America. And this is our county commission training handout that I got when I became a commissioner. And this was produced by Montana State University Local Government Center. And they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. I'd say this is worth 1,000,000. We've got these young people on what used to be a road from the looks of things. It's all overgrown with weeds. And they're on their bicycles and they're looking at the end and they can't see what's down there.
You should also put Mako in there right along with ICLEI.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mako's a big promoter of this. We need to understand that these sustainable development policies permeate every county in America and are being openly promoted by both major political parties. I hate to say that, but we've got progressive socialists in the Republican Party as well as in the Democrat Party. We need to take our party back and make it the constitutional Republican government and party that we had to begin with. It's time that we stand as Americans and protect the liberties and freedoms guaranteed under the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. We need to hold freedom more precious than comfort. We need to make thinking, reading, participating, and learning more important than leisure and being entertained. We need to become enlightened, motivated protectors of our legacy and defend leaders that understand and are willing to risk everything to save our republic. We're not a democracy, we are a republic. So what can you do to help? Elect public officials that understand their duty to serve and protect the citizens they represent. Under the Constitution, local government should be the most representative of individual citizens. Get involved. The reason we've lost so many of our rights is because we sat on our backsides and allowed everyone else to do the heavy lifting. He who shows up wins. We need to start showing up. We need to learn, we need to read, we need to educate ourselves and become teachers of others. Knowledge is power and ignorance is not bliss, it's just ignorance, and if it's allowed to go on long enough it becomes stupidity.
That's right.
Hold politicians and bureaucrats accountable for their actions. If you see something you don't like, tell them about it and demand that they correct it. We need to become a lot more forthright in our messages to our elected political leaders. Don't expect something for nothing. There's absolutely no free money, and what we ask for today with borrowed money will enslave our children tomorrow. Care about their future more than you care about your own comfort. And anybody that thinks the Second Amendment and the relentless attacks, which we're seeing right now, are only promoted by hapless American politicians, guess again, this is outside of the UN building. They're famous for that little sculpture. There are none so blind as those who will not see. There are none so deaf as those who refuse to hear. That's from Jonathan Swift's Polite Conversation. Thank you all for attending this presentation, and God bless America. Susan, I put this up because I just love it. Looks like you've had a little bit too much to think. the
Yeah, that's
thoughtful lady.
pretty telling, yeah.
Dan,
It's a heavy program.
I need to close the meeting and
Sure.
then be open for questions. The time has run out, a little past it. The meeting name, and it talks about the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and there's another name in there that had already started this global takeover, and this was done by manufacturing guns, ammunition, things used in war because they make the money. So guess why we have so many wars? Hello, that's a wake-up call. I recommend you read that book. It is fiction, but is based on fact. We had the gals who are, what's the name of the group, Sylvia? The water group?
Oh, anyway.
Dan?
Let me get it. The address.
I'm not sure which one
Terry
you're referring
Backs.
to.
Oh,
Western
I know
Montana
the
Water
people's
Rights.
names,
Terry Backs, yeah.
But what's the name of the group?
Western Montana Water Rights.
Okay, Western Montana Water Rights. We had them come speak to Pachyderm, and I think we only had like 10 people here. And this talks about what's going to happen. It's exactly what Dan is talking about. Do you want us to get them to come back again? So you can hear what they have to say. It is nauseating. They want to take everybody's water rights away from them. Okay? Nobody's interested in having them come back.
Not right
Yes.
away. First, they'll start charging us for, we're leasing their water, so we'll have to pay. There'll be a meter on our own wells when we live out in the country like I do. And then it'll go up, and then you can't afford it. And you just quit and leave. That's what's happened to the Oregon ranchers that lost their water rights. And so they couldn't raise cattle. They had to leave. Their land is worthless.
So, do you want them to come back and speak at some point?
Yes.
Of course.
Raise your hands.
Of course, you should just have them.
Okay, because I've got their number. I know how to get a hold of them. And the other thing, I'm sorry, Dan.
If we can get that up,
Yeah.
make as many copies.
Dan has given me a copy of website information access. It lists all the websites, recommended reading, et cetera, I'm going to give this to John Angwin, and he will get it out to all Pachyderm members and all Central Committee members. Meeting is adjourned. Next week will be Jordan Hess, representative of Ward 2, and John Wilkins, representative of Ward 4, telling us what their agenda is. They are not contested in their wards. Meeting is adjourned. Have a good week.
Okay. Now, I'll stay as long as you want me to. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's any pushback within the UN against Agenda 21,
Is there any pushback?
within the UN itself.
No. I mean, we have to understand that, there might be some minor pushback, but no. We have to understand that we are one of the very few constitutional republics in the UN. Of all the member nations, most of them are either socialist, communist, or some tin pot dictatorship. And there are very few countries like ourselves that are members of the UN. If they get their entire program in place, we'll be just one vote. There won't be a Security Council, and we will just be one vote. And that's what was always envisioned, because honestly, the UN was created by communists for communists, and we were sucked into the process because we had so many of them in the implementation of it. Yes,
Article
ma'am.
61.
Hi, Dan. I'm Gloria.
Boards of Review, Magna Carta.
Oh, hi, Gloria.
Wonderful presentation. We've been talking about it for about 5 years in our group and have different meetings. One of the things we run up
run into in this county is that when Governor Bullock was Secretary, what was he? He was the Attorney General. He issued his interpretation of land use in agriculture. Mr. Troutwine and I have ranch land up in the Blackfoot, and there are other members that come here that have ranch land, and so when he issued that interpretation, immediately the county jumped onto it to start planning and zoning what we could do with rules and regulations. Senator Guthrie introduced a bill to protect us so that we wouldn't have to fall under all the regulations he was planning, or the county was planning, and then the governor vetoed it. Now, this past week, the county has had hearings because they've gone forward with some really strict rules and regulations. What can we do to counter that? Will we be able to beat them in the legislature? Because Missoula County is focusing on land grabbing, while the Flathead is focusing on water. So both, we're stuck. And this county hasn't said anything or taken a stand on water because somebody else is doing the fight for them someplace else.
Sure. My comment on that is that we need to volunteer for all these boards. We need to do things like becoming county commissioners or state representatives or senators. I mean, we need to get better candidates involved in this stuff. And incidentally, I have to use this disclaimer. I'm a little late, but I'm here representing myself and not Madison County or the other two county commissioners. That being said, when I do these programs, I have a better than money back guarantee that I give at every one of my programs, and that is if anybody can prove anything in my program, any of the theses in my program are substantively incorrect, the first person that does that and can prove it to me, I will give $1,000. Now, I'm not a rich man, but I can tell you one thing. I've been given this program now for probably 4 or 5 years, and I want people to do the research. If you do the research yourself, you'll find out that everything I'm saying here may even be worse than what I say. Yes, sir.
We live in the middle of about 20 million acres of productive forests. There's 29 sawmills left in Montana. I do not hear any of the Western Montana county commissioners or groups standing up for this tremendous loss of economic reality. I'm also a contract wildland firefighter, and I'm standing here watching these same forests being burned down, and I'm hearing all kinds of propaganda. It's because of us putting the fires out, et cetera, when it comes back down to there is no utilization of the products from the national forest, and the county commissioners, including our own, do not say one word. Why is this?
Well, there are some that are standing up, and I happen to be one of them, but you've got down in Ravalli County, you've got a couple of them down there, you've got Beaverhead County, you've got Jefferson County, you've got a number of counties now that are county commissioners are finally starting to say enough is enough. Representative Dane's his forest bill with Doc Hastings is excellent. And what it does is guarantee that we can start cutting some of our timber again. It forces the radical environmentalists. We've got 2 radical environmentalists in our state that literally shut down every timber sale. And his bill, if it passes, and I think it's got a good chance of making it, will require those environmental groups to bond any of the lawsuits that they file. Well, it'll cut down a lot on those frivolous lawsuits. Incidentally, I have to say we don't have 29 sawmills. We've got 7 major ones, and that's all we've got left in this state. We've got some minor ones, but most of the sawmills are shut down. we need to start utilizing our natural resources. We've got the same problem in Madison County with mineral extraction. BLM and Forest Service, all these federal lands, these wilderness bills, they don't even want to acknowledge that mineral extraction exists. Yet we're living in the treasure state. We're living in a state where we've got more natural resources than any other state in this country. Why in the world aren't we making a livelihood off of it? But the secret is get involved, stay involved. I mean, I was retired. I've been retired. I was retired. I have the good fortune of making a good living, and I retired early, and I bought a ranch outside of Pony. I've been retired for quite a long time. I became a county commissioner, one of the worst paying jobs. It's the worst paying job I've had in 40 years. And it has the most demand for hourly, usually about 60, 70 hours a week. We've got to care enough about our country that we're willing to take some personal sacrifice to do something about it. We can't just sit here and talk about how, somebody else has got to do it for us. It's not going to happen. We've got to do it, or we might as well just fold up our tent and go away. Yes.
Have you met? I live in Mineral County, and our Senate district is number 7, and we elected Jennifer Fielder, and she's excellent, just excellent. I supported her from the very first time I heard her speak, and she's also our state co-chair. And I'm hoping that she has a method, personality, and everything to bring everybody together, because I attend the Tea Party meetings in Mineral County, and she attends as much as she can with her busy schedule. And our Tea Party supports our candidates. They put up more signs than probably our own committee did, because some of us are lazy. Anyway, how do we do this across the state to help the Tea Party elect a Republican and that has their viewpoints, their agenda? It's the same agenda in most counties. And how do we get everybody to work together and help a Republican candidate get elected?
You've got the best senator in the state, Monica.
Yeah, I know.
Jennifer and I are personal friends.
Oh, good.
And she is an absolute jewel. She knows how to stay conservative, think conservative, and yet get people to work with her. She is absolutely dynamite. Yeah. And I am going to be seeing her at the American Lands Council meeting down at Park City, Utah in about, just about a month.
Yeah.
But, well, not quite, actually, it's only a couple of weeks.
I wish we could get all the representatives up there, elected.
Well, you got to put your money and you got to put your sweat and you got to put your time behind good candidates. And you got to vet these candidates and make sure they aren't all BS and smoke and mirrors and make sure that they're the real deal.
And then our House representative, they called him Mr. No up there in the House. Nicholas Schwatter is a fine young man, graduated from a university in the UK, and so he's a barrister, not a lawyer. He's a barrister. And brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And he's ultra-conservative too. So.
Okay. Well, it all boils down to put your money and your effort into the process, because we've got to understand, and I didn't get into this at any great length, but these tax-exempt foundations and these non-governmental organizations are hand in hand. And the tax-exempt foundations are controlled by people that want to get this program in. And they've got the money and they've got the effort to do it. People don't realize, Ford Foundations, you know that Obama's mother was one of the foundation babies. She was all over the South Pacific promoting sustainable development before it ever happened.
Yeah.
I mean, these foundations are not, Henry Ford was a true patriot, but they've been taken over. The foundation's been taken over by people that don't have any intent of promoting free trade.
Do you think this whole process is biblical toward the end?
Personally, I do.
Yeah.
Personally, I do. I mean, I try to keep that out of the lecture because there's an awful lot of people that that don't want to think that way. But absolutely, I mean, what's going on today in this country, the changes that we've seen in our country, we've gone from a Christian republic to an atheistic democracy, and there's some stages that we've gone through. We started out as a constitutional republic, then we became a constitutional democracy, and then we became a socialist democracy, and the next one that we're heading for, we're socialist democracy right now, the next one is going to be a communist democracy. And these are the steps that we're following. And I mean, if you read and you research and you do all the study on this stuff, it's clear as day.
But they can't possibly think the American people were ignorant to just let them do it. They might be doing the frog in the water slow boil thing, but I'm from the south, 2,000 miles south of here, and I know those folks, once they figure out or find out what they're doing, they're going to rise up. They're not going to sit still.
That's why they kept all this stuff below the radar. I mean, most people, you talk to people about Agenda 21, it's only been the last year. I was telling some folks that I've been doing this stuff for about 10 years, and when I talked to people about Agenda 21 10 years ago, I mean, they thought I was wearing a tinfoil hat. Well, they did 2 years ago, really. But now, because of all the stuff that's being turned up, the fact that the Republican National Committee actually came out against Agenda 21, and they're starting to say the words, now all of a sudden people are starting to get it. And they've had this under the radar forever. I mean, it's been here for 21 years.
I want your opinion on a state guard. I'm sorry, honey. On a state guard. 22 states have their own state guards. The Montana National Guard, they will take their orders from the feds and do exactly what the feds tell them to do. And a lot of states, and it's in our Constitution, we can have one, but how do we get it funded, you know?
What for?
To protect our state from invasion.
For what? Are we going to go to war against Wyoming?
It's possible.
Well, you know,
anything is possible.
the fact is we are supposed to have a civilian National Guard, for lack of a better term. It's the well-regulated militia. Every state was supposed to organize their own militia, and it was supposed to be a citizen force.
Yes.
And it was modeled after Switzerland, and they do the same thing in Switzerland today. That's the reason that Switzerland's never been attacked by an outside country. Part of it's the terrain, but part of it is the fact that they've got every able-bodied civilian in Switzerland is armed and ready to defend their country.
Yahoo!
That's why I cannot understand if the city fathers, the commissioners, all we know Missoula has accepted it, right? If they were forced to, couldn't they be forced to look at a presentation like this? How could they not?
No.
I know they agree with it, but how can they be so ignorant that they don't understand what it's doing to themselves?
Well, a lot of people don't care. I hate to say that.
Money, right?
There's a lot of people that have been drinking this Kool-Aid about how great socialism is for the last 80 years. Our education system, there have been several studies done, but there was a group called the Reese Commission back in the mid-50s by a representative from Kansas, and they did a study on how foundations had affected our education system. They had a young lady, she was a young attorney, she went and studied the various foundations. She looked at their actual minutes from their meetings and went back as far as the late teens in the 20th century. So, 1918, 1919. And when she came back to the commission, they'd been promoting world government and socialism through the foundation money, through the teachers' colleges, since that very beginning. I mean, everybody knows about John Dewey, the Dewey Decimal System. He was the father of American progressive education. Well, there's your key right there, progressive. And he was a Fabian socialist. So we've had this in our education system for almost a century. In fact, in truth, it's probably been over a century. And we're fighting a really uphill battle. Yes, ma'am.
Dan, just to go on something about Senator Fielding, could you explain SJ 15? They had that hearing last week, the interim committee, on how it's a study regarding federal management of the lands.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I kind of recognize, and I wish one of your discussions you'll go into the Delphi technique, because I really think they're going to be using the Delphi technique in that study.
Well, they do, and if we can print that reading list and all that, I have the Delphi technique in there. Please look that up. Delphi technique is a system that was developed in the 1930s by Dr. Pavlov for Stalin. And it was a means of controlling thought and getting people to do things that they didn't really agree with, but get them to do it and then voluntarily do it through thinking that they were actually part of this process that brought that plan into place. And it worked so well that our RAND Corporation used the same technique and developed it even further in the 1950s for the CIA. And we've had the Delphi technique in our universities and even in our junior high schools and high schools and areas like that for a long time. There you go. And it's a consensus building process. And so they come in, it's a Hegelian dialectic. They come in with thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis. And that's what that Hegelian dialectic is. You identify a problem, you show them how they can solve that problem by doing something, and when they do that something, they end up creating the scenario that they wanted in the very beginning. It's very well thought out. You want to get rid of guns, okay? So the Second Amendment, you want to get rid of the Second Amendment. Well, you create situations where you have all the media reporting on all these deaths, all this killing, this rampage is going on, even though it's much less than it was even 30, 40 years ago, because they're reporting on it, on every single incident, and making a big deal out of it.
Big issue.
And so then they'll get their synthesis. They'll identify it, and they'll identify the solution, which is gun control, and then they'll get what they want. They'll get rid of the Second Amendment. It happens. It's happened throughout our history. We've got a lot of people in government, and I applaud people for being willing to participate in good government. But we've got an awful lot of people in our government that are scumbags. Right. They shouldn't even be there, and they're not very thoughtful. It's all about lining their own pockets. And I'm not saying,
right.
We've got some good ones too, but we've got some real bad ones.
And I just want to say one other thing. When you mentioned the commissioners, why don't the commissioners do anything? You hit it on the head when you said MACO, the Montana Association of Counties, which is part of NACO, the National Association of Counties. And the first thing they do when you elect a county commissioner, and Dan will vouch for that, is they train them. And unless you have county commissioners that have a brain in their head, they not only train them, they navigate and facilitate them towards this sustainable development. And also, they started training affordable health care as soon as it was passed. So that's why your commissioners don't think. We are grateful that we have certain commissioners like Dan who thinks for himself. Unlike Granite County, where we had a commissioner a terrible commissioner who worked for Mako and did everything Mako wanted. As a reward, the day she left office, because we kicked her out, she got a job with Mako. She does exactly what they want. And they'll take your property away. In one hand, they'll tell you that they have to abide by and recognize private property owners and their rights. And on the other hand, like the sheep, the wolf in sheep's clothing, they'll work to get it off of your hands through zoning and also, senior moment, what is it?
All the water rights issues are a big
right?
one with Mako, but you know, in truth, a lot of the people in all these organizations are good people, but they've been drinking the Kool-Aid so long that they can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
And that's a problem nationwide. I mean, we've got all kinds of good people that mean well. They aren't terribly tuned in on what's going on, but they think they do, and they think that somehow, biggest thing I can see problem I have with Mako is the fact that they think that their primary role is to see how much federal money they can get their hands on. And this is borrowed money. I mean, 47 cents out of every dollar that we spend in this country is borrowed money. What in the world kind of nonsense is that? I mean, we've got to get away from all these federal grants and all this borrowed money. We've got to get back to being an independent republic. Yes, ma'am.
To address what Pauline said about the commissioners, our Tea Party made a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation to the county commissioners. We sat in the office with all three of them and the head of the Office of Planning and Grants, and we gave them all the information, you know, that we possibly could in that time and answered questions, but then they still rejected it. Then when it came out that we were members of ICLEI, that Mayor Engen had been a mayor, or had been a member for like 5 or 6 years, then of course there was a big outcry. A lot of people, maybe Paul, you might have gone down there to demonstrate and give testimony that we should cancel that membership. I have to tell you, we got no support from the GOP, the leadership, and that has been a major problem. It's a blessing that you're here today, because actually you're backing up everything that we started to present 5 years ago. So I just want to thank you again, and I'm looking forward to your presentation to our Tea Party in November.
Happy to do it.
Great, great.
Yes, sir.
I think in the long run, we have to take a look at identifying candidates, supporting them, and getting them elected to office. Individuals that will support a constitutional republic, individual sovereignty, and limited government. I think that's what we have to do in the long run. But I think that the problems are becoming so apparent and so in front of us. The whole country is in the possibility of it being destroyed, I think, is extremely high. I almost think we're out of options. You know, writing letters to your congressman, it just isn't doing any good. I think we have to promote the concept of the fourth branch of government being the people. And I think we have to do that through grand juries or review boards or something where we can get the point across to these officials and either get the point across or get them removed from office that we do not want to become a communist dictatorship, and we want them to comply with the laws, and if they don't comply with the laws, we want to get them out of here. What I'd like to know from you is what you think of the concept of grand juries and review boards, or what process would you advocate to get some immediate relief?
Well, I fully believe grand juries they're part of what our founders envisioned as an ultimate recourse if we had no other. I do say that one of the reasons that we've gone so far down the wrong road, and one of the reasons that we've got so many issues that have gone unresolved, though, is because of lack of participation. I mean, that still is the bottom line. And politicians love nothing more than to be given all these strokes and told how wonderful they are, and they have nothing more that threatens them than getting thrown out of office by getting unelected. And we just need to be more vocal, and we need to be more involved in our whole political process. Now, I realize that isn't the problem of the folks sitting here, but you know, for the people sitting here, there's 10,000 out there that are doing nothing. And that is the problem, and we've got to wake those people up. And I told Susan, if I will come and do these programs for anybody, anytime. It's my mission in life is to make people aware of what in the world is going on, and we've got to get people to wake up. And the way to do that is to educate yourself, and then don't be afraid to say things. You know, we've got cowards in our government that are afraid to talk about this stuff. You know, we got to stand up and talk about it.
Well, I think there's a couple things that we got to do. One, we also have to strengthen the open meeting and public participation laws. If our elected officials don't comply with those laws, that should be grounds for removal from office. Which the corresponding aspect of that is we have to eliminate immunity from these public officials. They're effectively not complying with the law. They get paid representation by legal counsel, and then they claim immunity. Well, there's no consequence to it. So we have to get those things taken away from them so that we can get these laws enforced.
Well, and the key is really, in truth, is get better elected officials.
Yeah.
If you get one, then there's a chance you'll get two, if I'm talking county commissioners. And if you've got two, you've got a majority. You know, so it's kind of one of those things that it took 120 years for us to slide down the rat hole that we're in right now.
Yeah,
It's
my
going
point
to take
is,
a little
in some
bit
of
of
those
time to
cases,
get
you
back
get a
out.
jerk on there after the first coffee break, and you got to wait 6 years to get them out of there.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying it's time we get them out of there on a more immediate basis.
Well, and I certainly think grand juries are a good thing. I think fully informed juries are a good thing. I think a lot of the processes that we were given by our founders have been ignored.
And
But
that's another thing, another law that has to be changed. In Montana statutes, it says that you have to present that to a district court judge. I think rather than presenting it to a district court judge, maybe we have a citizens grand jury that we present that to, because the judges are going along with everything the government says, not what the people say.
This lady's had her hand up.
I agree with everything you just said, and everything's moot until we have tort reform. Everything. And you talk about putting better candidates up. We could put George Washington and Abraham Lincoln on our ballot. And you know why they lose? Because I sit in the university district in my house and I watch the kids over here, the skulls full of mush, get on the buses and in vans, and they're driven from precinct to precinct to precinct to precinct. The voter fraud in this town is rampant.
Yep.
Now, Mineral County doesn't have a college or university, so they were lucky enough to slide through that one. Those are the two issues in my book, as voter fraud and tort reform. And that would go a long way to taking care of the problem with our candidates.
And you know, you're talking about the way they organize the students to go around
and they vote exactly the way their professors tell them to vote.
They do. But the thing is understand one thing. When Ron Paul ran for president, he changed that dynamic. If our press in this country wasn't so totally controlled, Ron Paul, I think, could have easily beaten Barack Obama.
Yep.
I really truly believe that. But they did everything in their power to marginalize him.
You got
And
young people.
we had, well, in Madison County, we had, when they had the caucus, we had 24 people in our caucus, and 23 of them voted for Ron Paul. That, you know, and yet at the same time, when it went to the state Republican Party, they showed that everybody was in favor of McCain. Nobody voted for McCain. That was just nonsense. I mean, there's not a worse progressive socialist in this country than
Lindsey
John
Graham,
McCain.
too. Right. Lindsey Graham was right along with it.
Yeah, Lindsey Graham's right up there. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Is it possible to get 2 or 3 of your pages out of your presentation copy?
Get copies of it. This lady is, she said she wants to put it on YouTube.
I'm going to be putting it up on YouTube.
I've got a group up in the Flathead.
What I'm after is just a couple of those pages because I want to do some work, and I didn't have any way to copy the information down.
Sure.
I have one on what Agenda 21 is, and there's some
Sure.
those 3 or 4 pages I'd like to do.
I'd be happy to do that. You give me your email, and I'll give you mine. And
I'll send
be
it to
happy do
Gloria.
that.
You'll send it to Gloria.
I'll send it
and
to
then we can
everybody.
spread it around.
Mhm. That's why I tell Gloria, you gotta have somebody here recording these things.
And I'll,
All the meetings that they
As
have.
soon as it's out, it's dead. Sorry, because there's nothing. Look at all the people.
Well, thank you, folks. I'm sorry I kept you
Everybody's
so
left.
long.
Well, yeah.
But,
Who's
anyway,
here
I'll
from
get
the
on.
GOP? They're all gone.
You know, and I was looking at they all how they didn't want to discuss it.
Dan, thank you very much. And when you mentioned Ron Paul,
Uh-huh.
you also have to mention how the GOP, who you don't see here now, were also helping to go against Ron Paul.
I know.
And they're all gone.
In this past election.
Well, and I hate to say this, but Will just about
Thank you.
had a fit when I